The moment you woke up, you became a target, and nobody warned you. Not a target for obvious enemies, not for dramatic confrontations or visible opposition, but for something far more subtle, far more persistent, and far more dangerous than anything that announces itself openly. The unconscious reactions of people who are not ready to see what you now see, and who will not forgive you for seeing it. This is the part of spiritual awakening that nobody prepares you for. The books tell you about the expansion, the clarity, the profound shift in perception that comes when you begin integrating your shadow and confronting the hidden architecture of your own mind. They tell you about the freedom. They do not tell you about the cost. Deep psychological research spent decades observing individuals who underwent genuine awakening. People who had confronted their shadow, integrated the rejected parts of themselves, and developed an unusual, sometimes uncomfortable clarity about human behavior and hidden emotional dynamics. What emerged from that research disturbed the observers, not because the awakened individuals were suffering from their clarity, but because the world around them was reacting to it in ways that were quietly, consistently, and sometimes devastatingly destructive. The greatest threat to an awakened person, that research concluded, is rarely ignorance or obvious evil. It is the unconscious reactions of people who feel exposed by your awareness without understanding why. When you begin seeing through emotional defenses, social masks, and hidden motives, not because you are trying to, but because you simply cannot stop seeing what is there, something in the unconscious mind of the people around you reacts automatically. Resistance forms. Projection begins. Envy grows beneath the surface of perfectly ordinary interactions, and you become the problem. Not because you did anything wrong, because you can see. The response to this is not to suggest that awakened people hide who they are. It is more precise than that, and more powerful. There are 5 specific things that spiritually awakened individuals must learn to protect, not out of manipulation or secrecy for its own sake, but because psychological survival in a largely unconscious world sometimes requires a form of strategic silence that most awakened people are never taught. These are those 5 secrets. And if you are truly awake, at least one of them will explain something that has been confusing you for a very long time. The first secret is this: never reveal your absolute certainty. One of the first and most significant shifts that occurs during genuine spiritual awakening is a fundamental change in how you trust your own perception. Before awakening, most people spend enormous energy doubting themselves, questioning their intuition, second-guessing their read of situations, consistently looking outside themselves for validation before they allow themselves to trust what they already clearly feel. But when shadow integration begins, something remarkable happens. The perception sharpens. You start noticing emotional contradictions in conversations that most people move through without registering. You detect subtle inconsistencies between what people say and what their behavior reveals. You recognize intentions operating beneath the surface of polite social performance, not because you are looking for them, but because you have developed what can be called differentiated perception. The unconscious mind processes vastly more information than the conscious mind can articulate. When integration begins, that information becomes clearer and more trustworthy. Here is where the danger lives. When you express that certainty openly, when you speak with calm, confidence about what you see, it threatens the psychological stability of people who have never examined their own inner world. They have built their sense of reality on a fragile narrative. They need to believe they understand themselves and their environment, and when someone appears who clearly sees through the illusions that narrative depends on, discomfort erupts almost instantly. That discomfort does not announce itself honestly. It converts into projection, into accusations of arrogance. You think you know everything. You think you are better than everyone else. Accusations that have nothing to do with what you actually said, and everything to do with what your certainty made the other person feel about themselves. This pattern is consistent and well documented. Highly aware individuals who speak openly about their perceptions experience sudden social hostility. Relationships collapse. Workplaces become uncomfortable. Social groups turn defensive, not because the awakened person was wrong, because they violated an unspoken agreement that governs most social systems. The agreement that says, we pretend not to see what we see. The strategy is not blindness. It is restraint. See everything. Trust your perception completely, but do not announce your clarity to people who are not ready to receive it. Your certainty is a form of power, and power displayed to people who feel threatened by it does not protect you. It provokes them. The second secret is equally important. Never reveal your map of transformation. When awakening becomes intentional, when a person moves from passive insight to active individuation, they develop an internal map. They identify the childhood wounds that shape their patterns. They examine the unconscious habits that have been running their behavior from below the surface. They know exactly what they are working on, what they are dismantling, and what they are building in its place. This map feels like progress, and it is, but sharing it openly is one of the most dangerous things an awakened person can do. Here is why. Transformation threatens systems that depend on your predictability. Every family, every social group, every long-term relationship has an invisible structure of assigned roles. The rescuer, the victim, the peacekeeper, the one who absorbs blame so the system can maintain its balance. These roles are never discussed. They are simply enforced through subtle pressure, through expectation, through the particular emotional discomfort that surfaces when someone starts stepping outside the role they have always occupied. When you reveal your transformation strategy, you hand people the map to your vulnerabilities. They know exactly where your growth is happening. They know which areas are still tender. And that knowledge, consciously or unconsciously, becomes a tool for pulling you back. This has been observed repeatedly. People who share their healing journey in hope of encouragement encounter instead criticism, ridicule, or the subtle emotional pressure of people who needed them to remain unchanged. Not out of malice, out of fear. Your transformation destabilizes the system they depend on, and destabilized systems protect themselves. Do the work quietly. Allow the results to become visible over time. Transformation does not require an audience. Sometimes, the safest growth is the growth that no one sees until it is already complete. The third secret is one that changes everything about how you move through relationships. Never reveal your boundary for betrayal. Before awakening, many deeply feeling people struggle profoundly with boundaries. They forgive, repeatedly, not from genuine resolution, but from the fear of what enforcing a limit might cost them. They excuse harmful behavior. They tolerate disrespect with the quietly desperate hope that patience and continued love will eventually produce change in the person delivering the harm. Shadow integration changes this, not by making you colder, that is the misunderstanding, but by giving you something you previously lacked, the ability to see manipulation patterns clearly and in real time. The ability to distinguish between genuine compassion and the self-sacrifice that masquerades as compassion, while actually enabling harm. What can be called selective empathy, the capacity to care deeply without allowing that care to become a tool for exploitation. With this clarity, internal boundaries form. You know exactly what behavior you will no longer tolerate. You know exactly what action you will take when betrayal occurs. The threshold is clear. The response is decided. The only question is whether you announce it. Here is why. When manipulative personalities know your limits in advance, they do not respect them. They map them. They begin testing carefully, provoking situations designed to make your boundary enforcement look unreasonable, creating emotional confusion, recruiting others to question your judgment. They know the limit exists, and they work the perimeter of it, But when the boundary remains internal, when it is enforced without prior announcement, without explanation, without the warning that allows preparation for resistance, something entirely different happens. The manipulator approaches expecting the familiar pattern of tolerance they have always received. Instead, they encounter immediate, quiet, completely decisive consequences. No argument, no dramatic confrontation, no extended explanation of why what they did was wrong. Simply the removal of access. The end of the dynamic, quiet, calm, and permanent. That is not coldness. That is the most complete form of protection available to an awakened person. Compassion, fully intact, completely undefeatable. The fourth secret is perhaps the most sacred. Never reveal your deepest wound. Every person who undergoes genuine psychological awakening carries a wound from their past. Abandonment, betrayal, years of being emotionally unseen by the people who are supposed to see you most clearly. Unresolved trauma creates what can be called the compulsion to repeat, the unconscious recreation of the same painful dynamics again and again, in different relationships and different contexts, in the hope of finally resolving what was never healed. But when shadow integration occurs, something extraordinary happens to that wound. It transforms. The experience that once produced only suffering begins producing wisdom. The pattern that once controlled you becomes visible, and visible patterns lose their automatic power. Gradually, what was once your deepest wound becomes your most precise instrument of understanding. The story that once represented your greatest weakness becomes the source of your clearest strength. This transformation is real, and it is yours. Protect it. Because when you reveal a fully healed wound to people who are still living inside their own unhealed ones, you create a problem you did not intend. Your healing challenges the identity they have built around their suffering. It reflects back the possibility that healing is available to them. And that reflection, rather than inspiring them, often produces the particular discomfort of someone who is not yet ready to leave the story that has defined them. Their response, often unconscious, is to return you to the role you have left. They treat you as fragile. They repeatedly reference your past pain. They encourage you to revisit what you have already integrated, not to harm you, but because your wholeness is more threatening to their narrative than your wound ever was. Your wound is not a story for public display. It is a source of wisdom to be shared only with people who are genuinely ready to receive it. And you, with the differentiated perception you have developed, already know who those people are. The fifth secret is the most subtle, and in many ways the most practically important. Never reveal your full awareness of social dynamics. When genuine psychological awakening matures, something unusual develops in how you navigate the social world. You can sense emotional tension in a room before anyone has spoken a word about it. You read unspoken signals in conversation, the micro-expressions, the shifts in energy, the moments when what someone is communicating beneath their words diverges from what their words are saying. You recognize the unconscious roles people play in their relationships. The performer, the peacemaker, the one whose anger everyone works around, the one whose approval everyone is quietly competing for. The social mask we present to the world can be understood as the persona. Most people become so identified with their persona that they genuinely believe it is their real self, that the version of themselves they present in social contexts is the complete truth of who they are. The awakened person understands something different. The persona is a tool, a functional, useful, not inherently dishonest tool for navigating social interaction, but a tool, not an identity. Once you understand this about yourself, you naturally begin to see it in others. And that understanding, that clear, continuous, involuntary perception of the gap between who people are presenting themselves as and what is actually operating beneath the presentation, is perhaps the most powerful form of awareness available to a human being. It is also the one most likely to make other people only uncomfortable if they suspect you have it. If people become aware that you see social dynamics at this level of depth, they begin to feel exposed. They start wondering what you notice about them. Whether you are silently analyzing the gap between their persona and their reality, whether you are judging what you find there, whether the conversation they are having with you is actually being observed from a distance they cannot access or close. That feeling of exposure creates defensiveness. And defensiveness, in people who have never examined their own inner world, frequently converts into hostility directed at the source of the discomfort. The response to this is not to diminish your awareness. It is to remain human. Allow imperfections to appear naturally. Do not present as flawless, all-perceiving, or beyond the ordinary struggles of being a person in the world. This is not deception. It is humility, and humility, in this context, serves a genuinely protective function, both for you and for the people around you. It keeps interactions natural. It prevents others from feeling like subjects of analysis, rather than participants in a genuine human exchange. The deepest truth beneath all 5 of these secrets is this. This is not about hiding. It is about protecting. Consciousness, real, integrated, shadow-confronting consciousness, changes everything about how you perceive the world. But the world itself changes slowly. Most of the people you move through your daily life alongside are operating from largely unconscious patterns they have never examined, in service of psychological structures they have never identified, driven by wounds they have never addressed. That is not a verdict on their worth. It is simply their current position on a journey that moves at a different pace for different people. And the awakened person who understands this, who has genuinely integrated the insight rather than simply acquired the intellectual concept, does not respond with judgment. They respond with the particular, patient, quietly powerful wisdom of someone who knows exactly what the journey costs and exactly how long it takes. The balance is precise, inner clarity and outer diplomacy, not as a compromise of one for the sake of the other, as the sophisticated, mature, fully conscious integration of both. The ability to see everything completely, accurately, without the filters that unconscious living requires, while moving through the world with the grace of someone who understands that seeing is not the same as speaking, that knowing is not the same as declaring, that the most powerful form of awareness is often the one that reveals the least about its own depth. Psychological sovereignty, genuine, lasting, unshakable sovereignty, does not come from broadcasting everything you know. It comes from the quiet, grounded confidence of someone who no longer needs external validation for their internal clarity. Someone who can hold the full weight of what they see without the compulsion to make others see it too. That is not weakness. That is the complete maturity of awakened consciousness, and it is rarer than awakening itself. So here is what this understanding requires of you, not as a set of rules to memorize or techniques to perform, as a genuine interior shift in how you carry what you carry. Stop announcing your perception to people who are not ready for it. Not because your perception is wrong. It is not. Not because their discomfort is more important than your truth. It is not. But because the compulsion to make others see what you see is not a sign of awakened consciousness. It is a sign that your ego is still attached to being recognized as the one who sees. And that attachment is the precise vulnerability that the conscious reactions of others will find and exploit every time. Your clarity does not require their confirmation. What you perceive is real, regardless of whether anyone else acknowledges it. The moment you fully internalize that, the moment your certainty becomes genuinely self-sustaining rather than dependent on external validation, the compulsion to announce dissolves, and with it dissolves the primary source of the social hostility that has been confusing and exhausting you. Stop sharing your transformation with people who are invested in your remaining unchanged. This is not cynicism. This is the honest, compassionate recognition that not everyone in your life is capable of celebrating a version of you that disrupts the role they have assigned you. Some of them will catch up. Some will not. Your job is not to bring them along by force of explanation. Your job is to do the work, quietly, consistently, with the patience of someone who understands that results speak in a language that resistance cannot argue with. Let the change become visible through your behavior. Let the growth announce itself through the quality of your decisions, the steadiness of your presence, the particular calm of someone who has done the interior work that composure actually requires. That is the only announcement that cannot be dismissed, undermined, or projected onto. And protect what is sacred, your wound, your boundaries, your awareness. These are not things to be displayed. They are things to be lived, carried with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their value does not depend on other people's ability to perceive it. This is the final and most important truth that all 5 secrets are pointing toward. Awakening is not a performance. It is not a social identity to be claimed or a level of consciousness to be advertised. It is a private, ongoing, deeply personal process of Beko, being more fully yourself, more integrated, more honest, more genuinely present in your own life. The world will not always recognize it. Some people will resist it. Some will be made uncomfortable by it in ways they cannot articulate and will therefore direct at you in ways that are not fair. None of that changes. What is true? See everything. Protect your clarity. Move through the world with the quiet confidence of someone who understands far more than they feel any need to prove. That is not hiding. That is the full and complete maturity of everything you have been through to get here. And it is yours, completely, without anyone's permission. And if you want to explore deeper psychological insights on inner healing inspired by Dr. Gabor Maté and understand the hidden wounds that shape your mind and emotions, make sure to subscribe this channel. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.